All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Pedroza. I'm the marketing manager for Aurigo Software Technologies. I want to thank you for joining us today for the first webinar in Aurigo's Best Practice webinar series. Aurigo Software has been helping capital owners manage their infrastructure programs for about 2 decades now. And in today's webinar, we will be covering best practices in land transaction and right-of-way management. A few quick notes before we get started. This webinar is recorded and we will provide all participants with the recording. The slides will also be provided to all registered participants. We also ask that you submit any questions throughout the webinar via the Q&A chat box that's right there below, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer all questions during the available time, we will follow up with you via email. Now, I'm really excited to introduce our distinguished panel. We have our moderator and marketing director of Aurigo Software, Mr. Richard Kramer, who brings over a decade of experience helping capital owners leverage modern cloud-based SaaS solutions. Richard, welcome.
Good afternoon, Stephanie.
And really excited to introduce our guest speaker, Christie-Lee Hazzard, GIS project specialist within the Property Services branch at York Region, where she is responsible for the administration of the Aurigo Masterwork system and providing data, analytics, and visualizations to the branch. Christie-Lee brings over 16 years of experience as a GIS professional, specializing in GIS project management, technical solutions management, conservation management, and land securement to help leverage the land transaction management process for the region. Christie-Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me as part of this. And we're looking forward to the opportunity to share the region's journey.
No, really excited. Now I will hand the stage over to Richard Kramer.
Thank you, Stephanie, and a very warm welcome from me to all the members of our audience who are with us here today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm very excited to hear from Christie-Lee as she takes us through this journey that York Region went through to really revamp their land management and right-of-way processes. And hopefully we'll learn, some of those lessons learned and some of the best practices that were uncovered in that process. Before we start, however, we'd like to get an idea of the makeup of our audience. So Stephanie, I believe you have a quick poll that you're going to launch?
Yes, so I just launched a quick poll. Please raise your hand if you can't see it, but if you can please answer the poll. We want to know who's in our audience. One of the questions is about your organization. The other question best describes yourself. Oh, it looks like people can't see the poll. All right, can people see the poll now? It looks like you can probably see the poll. So I'll give you a couple of seconds, but now, like I said, we want to know if you're with a public agency, if you're an architect or an engineer. If none of the options here actually apply to you, just hit other, but I'll give the poll another couple of seconds. Yep, seeing everything come in. It looks like there's a lot of public agencies, so that's really exciting. We're happy to have you guys all here.
Yeah, that was expected. A lot of public agencies, a lot of right-of-way folks in the role. And the rest are kind of spread out. So we got a lot of folks who describe themselves as real estate management, land acquisition. So that's great. Should we give it a couple more seconds?
Yeah, we got a couple more seconds. It looks like we have a couple of people who still haven't submitted their questions. All right, I am going to end the poll now. And if you guys want to see the results, like Richard said, most of it was all public agencies, a couple of consultants, architects, and engineers. So we're excited to have you here. And Richard, you can take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, we can close that poll. Folks, if you still have the poll up on your screen, you can just click the X in the top right corner. It should go away. So I'm going to hand it over to Christie-Lee now. And Christie-Lee, you're going to start by telling us a little bit about York Region.
Yeah, perfect. So let's get you all acquainted with the region. York Region really is home to about 1.1 million, and it's located in Ontario, Canada. And I'm sure many of you are from different areas, so and may be familiar with Ontario. The region itself, more specifically, spans through southern Ontario from heading north from Toronto up into Lake Simcoe. And it's a growing region that's made up of sort of 9 municipalities. And we have what's known as a 2-tier structure, where the region is basically responsible for things like roads and emergency services, where the municipalities are responsible for things like their parks and their libraries and services to the community. The region itself is really a mix of urban and rural landscapes and is really a diverse for industries. On the urban front, it's Ontario's 3rd largest business center, and on the rural front, the region is home to vibrant and thriving agriculture and agri-food sector. So now that we've kind of just sort of given you an overview of where the region is, I want to get you a little more acquainted with an overview of who we are and our interconnectivity of the parties, and also the parties that were involved, particularly in our journey of building out the system. So the region really is comprised of these 6 main departments. And then we also have 3 subsidiaries plus the York Region Police. And land really is an integral part of the region's business. And with Realty Services, which is a business unit within Property Services branch, basically responsible for all acquisitions, dispositions, and inventory management for the region. And they work really closely with legal and finance to ensure that all the client groups have what they need when they need it. So if a road needs to be built, it can be. So all the departments here that you can see highlighted with red boxes were engaged from the very beginning of the project and really throughout all the development phases, with Property Services and Data Analytics and Visualization Services branches leading the project. And today, LTM Masterworks is really administered by Property Services branch, but it affects several departments within the region. And for example, client departments such as Transportation Services are now starting to get more involved and starting to input their own projects and use our reporting functionality. And client groups like the Corporate Finance and our YorkNet or YTN telecom network are benefiting from the system and the data within the system to use for accessing and tracking, and even using in their own tools for decision-making processes. So you're probably wondering, what was really the catalyst for the region to kick off and start the LTM project journey? And really, it was the Viva Next bus rapid transit project. And essentially, this was a project that was designed to expand 7 corridors on 3 of our major regional roads, and to create bus center lanes as pictured in on the screen. And what happened here was that all the acquisitions were vested in York Region's name. There were 600 plus properties that were affected, and primarily many of these properties were privately owned. And on any given property, there could be multiple owners and tenants. For all of these properties, the region went straight to expropriation and on all corridors. And they also had situations where there was extensions to construction timeframe, which then led to more temporary easements on lands where we had previously expropriated. So today, even after most construction is finished, the region is still dealing with outstanding financial liabilities, which it really is legally responsible for, including things like the market value, cleanup of environmental contamination, business losses and injurious affection associated with expropriation and or construction, 6% interest accrued, legal and expert fees, both external and internal. And unfortunately, those obligations and responsibilities don't end once we've completed the project. So once these buses are driving down the road. And these outstanding regional liabilities really led to a lot of questions, not only from the teams that were involved, but also from the region's legal teams, as well as senior management. And these questions were things like, how many properties have we completed? How many agreements are still outstanding? How much liability do we actually have? And can we forecast settlements? So can we know what we can expect or how much budget we need to make sure we can complete and pay out all the properties? These types of questions really aren't easy to answer in Excel spreadsheets. And it was really difficult to get reliable details each time these types of questions were asked, because many of these spreadsheets were maintained by various departments in isolation from one another. And any sort of status or financial reporting really had to be manually manipulated to give the answer to the senior management. And in addition to that, we also didn't have any GIS integration. I mean, the region has a very strong GIS and visualization capabilities, but because they weren't connected, providing locational information really became quite challenging and time consuming. And then we also didn't have integration with our corporate document management system. And this is important too, because we didn't have links to the official documents. So the approval documents or the fully executed agreements or proof that things were actually complete and paid out. And overall, we wanted to start to ensure confidentiality of our records and make sure that they were in a safe and secure environment rather than Excel spreadsheets that really have no security and were being, sort of emailed here or there and that sort of thing. So discussions about these drivers really helped the region to understand how important it would be to take a collaborative approach and really understand the need and help make critical decision points throughout this process. And to begin the journey, really a cross-functional team was gathered, and it consisted of the project sponsor, who was and continues to be our Commissioner of Corporate Services, individuals from our legal services teams, technical experts that would provide input and future support for both the hardware and the software pieces that are required to support the system. And those included IT specialists, data and GIS specialists, and many more, plus the subject matter experts, right? So we needed to include realty services within property services and all the folks that would be using the system at the end of the day, as well as their client groups, to ensure that we were capturing the correct information in the right method. And this team, really having this sort of cross-functional team, brought shared experiences from different disciplines and different perspectives to the table. And together they worked to outline our project vision. And essentially the project vision was to have a fulsome system that would be our single source of truth. So no more Excel documents floating around from different departments with different data. Something that was fully integrated with our GIS system so that any time you could see what you were, the physical location that you were actually dealing with the transactional information. And also not only that, but integrating it into our system would allow the user to have the same look and feel that they were already currently used to, ensuring a positive user experience while they're in the system. It had to have the flexible status and financial reporting and dashboarding capabilities as well, so that users could tailor sort of what they wanted to look at, as well as be able to provide quick and reliable information at any given time and not sort of wait for someone to prepare something from the spreadsheets. We also wanted it to have built-in templates that could be pre-populated with information already entered in the system to help reduce transcription errors and really create overall efficiencies for the region. And then finally, we really wanted to make sure it was integrated with that corporate records management system so that users would be able to access all the information about the transaction directly from the system and not have to go to multiple places to find the information. So with all of these things on the wish list, the team knew that it was going to take time to spec out and procure a system that could do everything in this vision. And at this point, the team had not really done an industry scan, nor did they know that Aurigo had a solution that could address the region's wish list. So in the interim, they knew they had to get out of Excel spreadsheets that was time consuming and only allowed single editors. There was no security. So the idea was, let's get the data cleaned up and housed in a single database. And that database that we create will help design for our future system and enable us to be more efficient and provide reliable metrics. So the first step was really a joint effort between the data analytics visualization services and property services branches to work with the various departments and build this data model. And this is a challenging task because real estate side really is more complex than it first appears, as you can see from this diagram. So there's a significant number of entities represented by the images. So the property, the owner tenant, the land interest, the agreements, the claims. And then the interconnectivities and the dependent relationships represented sort of by those black, blue, and red lines. And all of these things sort of need to be done for closed out for a property to actually reach completed or resolved state. Basically meaning there's no further liability and we're done. And in the data model, this translated to many elements, structures, and dependent relationships. And of course, there are simpler land transactions. However, the data model really needed to account for the worst case. This technically isn't even the worst case. There's still about 5% of transactions that will really never fit a data model. And that's just the way it is. So we really built it to accommodate about 95% of our transactions, and then the rest we find workarounds for. So once the data model was ready, we deployed the interim solution that was essentially built in MS Access Forms, and it really did provide that multiple editor piece that we were looking for and entering into a single database. The tool didn't yet have mapping, but we did have reporting capabilities, and that helped us answer questions far more quickly, and we were able to support the mapping needs still outside of the system, giving us more time to focus on the future systems, so the funding and the final solution, and going through that procurement process of getting us to where we needed to be. So let's look now at how long the journey took us. So from understanding the problem to launching the solution, it took just over 2 years, starting with the siloed Excel spreadsheets in January of 2015, building the data model, migrating the data out of those Excel spreadsheets into the database, and deploying that interim tool took about 6 months. And that sort of made it so that we could answer the questions and start to work on what our final solution needed to look like. And during the time while we were still working on building the interim solution, we also had already assembled our cross-functional team, and we were working to secure funding, holding discovery sessions, trying to understand the full need, and starting to go through the long procurement effort that included that RFQ process. And as we were doing that, we continued to build and improve our data model, develop our business processes so that we were ready for what that end system would look like. In September of 2016, so just over 1.5 years after we understood the problem, the team awarded the contract to Aurigo, and we began design phases right away, configuring and customizing Masterworks solution to really meet what York Region specific land management needs were. So we basically, the design, build, and testing phases took about 1 year to complete. And it really was a collaborative effort that was led by GIS project specialists from Data Analytics and Visualization Services and Property Services team. And it included Aurigo team members so that we could really get a good understanding of what the product could do, but also what we needed within the region. And I'll admit the design phase was the bulk of our time, even with our interim solution. And it really included hours of working sessions. We ended up developing a 40-page statement of deliverables, and we ended up with 28 configuration documents. And during the build phase, Aurigo took those configuration documents, built them to spec with the full support of the York Region team as required. So, there were many mornings where, we'd meet with the engineering team and work through sort of some of the elements of the build. And that's just to keep things moving and make sure we were always moving forward with the phase. And this build also included us taking the data that we had in our interim tool and getting it ready to be migrated into the final solution, the final Masterworks solution. And for us, where this impacted us is we had our projects and our properties mapped, but we didn't have all our interest mapped. So we had some work to do on our end to make sure everything would work. And when we put our reverse integration in place, that it would function as we expected. And during that build phase, we also set up 3 environments: our development environment, our staging environment, and our production environments. And then our testing phases, we basically tested all of the elements in our development environment against our config docs. And once we were happy with everything, we pushed it all to our staging environment and then held 9 admin and user training sessions on top of multiple testing cycles where we let the users physically test components that were relevant to their specific roles. And all in all, the team launched the production environment in November 2017, and the region has been using the system ever since.
Yeah, thanks, Christie-Lee. If I can just add to that, I think this is a fairly typical journey of an agency your size that they would go through, but everyone's mileage might vary. So when you're working with public agencies, one thing I've found is that everybody needs their own configuration. There's very seldom is there a one size fits all solution for what you're looking for. So if you're just starting your journey, I absolutely agree. It's critical that you get the data model correct and that you understand like your processes and how you want them to run before you actually deploy the solution. But if you're just starting with that journey, you know, the folks on our team who've worked with York Region and other clients like York Region can certainly lend you that expertise of what you need to do to kind of start that process. So, you know, definitely talk to us and we can help you out in that regard.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, and you know, when we look back, it would have been nice to have had, you know, some support through that. And I know if we were starting today, we definitely would look to Aurigo for support around those pieces for sure. And we continue to work with Aurigo to do improvements and things like that. And we always look towards the expertise. So now that we've seen the implementation timeline from sort of understanding that problem to launching Masterworks, I want to walk through sort of some of our key highlights that were part of our product vision. But I'm not going to be providing a live demo because really our data is quite confidential. So instead, I will move through some screenshots over the next few slides, starting with this launch screen. Basically, this launch screen allows our users to sign in, and we do use single sign-on here. Currently, we're using ADFS, but we, as a region, are looking at how and exploring sort of the switch to Azure. But in any case, once the user is signed into the system, it recognizes them and their assigned user role. But before I continue, something off the hop that I kind of want to share, especially since we've just come out of a pandemic, we're not out, we're on our way out, I hope, is that having this system in place really has allowed us to continue our work seamlessly through the pandemic. And I have to admit that the users are becoming daily more efficient and continue to work quite seamlessly and are using the system in a more fulsome way. And if we didn't have the system, I'm not sure we would have been as successful with the transition to working from home as we have been. So I think that's really key, you know, and sort of when you're doing things like that, if getting thrown into a pandemic definitely makes people appreciate the system. So now let's take a brief walk through some of the key features that were important drivers and part of our overall vision for the region, and starting with mapping integration.
Before I switch slides, Christie-Lee, I'm seeing a few questions come in from the audience. So folks, keep getting those questions into the Q&A box that you have available on your control panel there, and we'll get to the questions at the end of Christie-Lee's presentation. Thanks, folks.
Sure. So moving into mapping integration, this was a big piece for us because it's really hard to, you know, acquire or dispose or even have land inventory if you don't know where it is in your region. So it was good for us to have that integration as opposed to the pieces separately. One of the really cool things that we did is we actually put reverse integration in place, and I kind of mentioned it before, but what ultimately this means is that the system uses all of our corporate mapping technologies and integrates them into Masterworks. So the user sees and feels everything that they were already used to. And as a bonus, we have a copy of the data that the users enter into LTM Masterworks in real time in our York Region database. So this is a sample of our overview map where basically users can see their properties, their subject properties, their interests, and they can also search. What we've also gone and done is we've built in form integration where the user can actually input information using the web app environment. So when the user clicks on the map and opens a window containing York Region data, for example, our parcel fabric, where the user can then either select directly parcels from our parcel fabric or draw their own boundaries, which will take all the parcels within that boundary. And we have this set up for our project subject properties and land interests. And on save, the parcel details from the corporate database actually become part of the transaction record. So if you can click, Richard. The physical record pulls in the parcel details, so the address, which municipality, the PINs, things like that. So all of the history of that parcel goes along with the transactions that we record in the system. Another key feature that we wanted in Masterworks was the flexible status and financial reporting capabilities. So there really are now many report options in Masterworks. I am just showing you a light sampling of them. We have subject property level reporting, where the user can look at specific record details within a subject property. So for example, land agreements. And once they get this report, they can then export it in various formats. We commonly use PDF and Word, but there are other options, and then save it sort of wherever they want, whether they want to save it locally, whether they want to save it in our corporate eDocs system, which is our corporate records management system. Then they have project level reporting, which basically displays and rolls up information about a project. So if there's 20 subject properties, it would provide all the detail about those properties at that project level, including the subject properties and interests within that project. And then we have the enterprise level reporting, which is heavily used by us, both the users and by reports that we send to senior management. And basically these reports display multiple projects, their associated properties, agreements. And for example, we have a property acquisition status report, which was customized specifically for our senior management, that will show multiple projects, the status and the financials at that project level. So they can quickly have conversations, show it to council, whatever it may be, but it's a very customized report that we use internally. We also have dashboards that display information at project and enterprise levels, and they also have status and financial details, and users can tailor those to their needs. So up until we launched Masterworks, we did not really have any role-based permissions, security, or automated workflows based on business rules. Now that we have the system, we actually able to have multiple editors at any given time that have user-specific roles. And here's an example of some of the user roles and assignments of those roles. A user can be assigned multiple roles. They usually have a primary role. So for example, I pretty much have all of these roles, but really my two main roles are PSB and admin, PSB GIS and admin. So any user could have multiple roles, and you'll actually have the permissions for the highest role that you have. So if my admin role would trump any of my other roles, for example. And using these roles, we're able to build in business processes and workflows based on what these users need to do. So here's a little example of a very basic workflow where our coordinator would have created an interest geometry, and they would have submitted it to geometry review, which would have come to the PSB GIS team. They would have in the back end reviewed the geometry, approved it. Once approved, a notification email then goes to the coordinator, letting them know that they can go on to the next step, which in this case is linking it to an agreement record. Once they've done that, linked it to the agreement record, created the agreement, they would then submit the agreement to management review, at which point a realty manager supervisor role would either approve or reject, or could potentially send it further on to legal. And then once it's been reviewed, it moves into an in progress state. And then from there, once the transaction is completely done, we could then move it to resolved when everything's said and done on the property or the project. Now, the last key feature that I want to share is agreement templates and our integration with our records management. So basically, we have all of our corporate legal templates in the system. It's more than 65 templates. And what's nice about them is they pre-populate based on various information that users have already entered in the system. And in this case, it's typically the realty clerk role that will go into an agreement record. They'll select the template from the list, and then they'll use a merge and attach, which will basically on click, the merge and attach feature will work. And it's similar to mail merge in Word. So if you've ever used that, so basically the system will, it'll come out as a Word document that will be pre-populated based on anything that you've told it to grab from the system. That record becomes an attachment, and once it becomes an attachment, the user can then basically modify, print, export, or save the record, or pretty much do whatever they want. Regionally, though, that record is typically saved in our corporate document management system, eDocs, and then linked into what we have as an eDocs grid, which is shown here. And what this really does is it allows the user to directly access everything right in the system. And having these templates in Masterworks and integrating the system with our document management system really has created efficiencies for the region and has been an invaluable feature for us during the pandemic, especially with the staff working from home, because they don't have to go searching for things. They can come here, go directly to their project, and find all the relevant information. So there really are so many more features that we could highlight, but this was really a very quick snapshot into the region system intended only to demonstrate that Masterworks really did provide that fulsome solution. The region had visions. So, and as you know, as a result, we really did get what we asked for. We now have a corporate land transaction management tool that you can actually click, Richard, that is our single trusted source of truth for regional land transaction data. And that's great. There's one source, not multiple, and everybody's speaking the same language when we talk about what our liabilities are and the statuses of where things are at. It makes it really easy to quickly gather reliable and reproducible information. And this is really important because we're always reporting on what's happening. It needs to be reliable, and we need to get it quickly. No more manual manipulations where it can be, of course, there's always some things that have to happen outside the system, but all in all, mostly everything we need right at a click of a few buttons. Full integration with our corporate GIS system, and this allows us to incorporate data into other systems that the region uses, but it also allows us to bring data from those other systems directly into Masterworks as well. And this helps a lot. It helps all groups with their decision-making processes. We now have that multi-user role-based security, and it has greatly reduced duplication of data entry, tracking, and inconsistencies in our reporting. And it really has allowed us to configure what users can access based on their roles, and we can modify and play with those within roles or adding roles. And we also have that integration with the corporate document management system, which allows the users to access the relevant information related to their transactions, the draft documents, the correspondence, executed agreements, those types of things. So getting to this point really was not easy. And every day we kind of continue to improve the system as we go and find new ways to add functionality. But some of the things that really helped the region get to where we are today include deciding right away what type of support needs that were going to be needed, as far as things like resourcing or products, software, all of those types of things. You're going to need support. You're going to need support from your technical professionals. You're going to need support from your subject matter professionals. And of course, you're going to need to engage your senior management early and collaborate, really collaborate with all those stakeholders. Get your project sponsor, build your charter, know what you're doing that's in scope, what's out of scope, because we had a lot of things that are out of scope that we're still, working on adding. Build a prototype if you can, because it will help with the end product. It would have taken us way more than a year to build and design and test the Masterworks system if we hadn't built that interim tool first. Involve the technical experts. You'll need them. and account for ongoing maintenance and support, because you'll need both, right? You'll want to upgrade the system as the software improves, and you may want to do it yearly. You may want to do it every couple of years, but know that sort of upfront, and the type of support that you're going to require from Aurigo specifically, but also even from your internal resources. So you may not need a permanent person, but you may need to borrow someone during certain times, like upgrades. And expect growing pains. It's just the nature of putting a system in place. And that's it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Christie-Lee. I have nothing to add. I absolutely concur with everything that you've said there. It's about getting the right team involved, getting those stakeholders brought into the process, and then working through it. So I think we are ready to go to some questions from the audience. So folks, keep putting those questions in if you have them. And Stephanie, what do we have?
Yeah, so we have a question from, I believe it's Tsunami Harder, and it says, so with the new system in Aurigo, will you no longer need to access partial mapping data and value from county website? Can it be all access in site? So I'm guessing the question that he's asking is, will you no longer need to go through parcel mapping, and can you access it all through the Masterworks system? And let me know if I answered that correctly or asked that correctly.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. So that was one of the key things that we needed, is that we didn't want people to have to go to multiple places to access the data that they needed. So corporately, we have all of the data integrated into applications that we serve out to the region. And literally all we did is tap into those applications. So they have access to everything now within Masterworks, as opposed to having to go outside of Masterworks to access those items. There are some additional pieces that, we want to continue to build in, but because we did it the way that we did, basically, if someone comes to us and says, we'd like to be able to access a different region's data, we can bring that into the system quite effectively by just adding it to our base mapping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I can just add to that, I mean, obviously we're not, the folks who are using GIS systems all day, every day, they're still going to do that in their main system. But the important thing about an owner tool is really to try and break down those silos, because technology at public agencies is often very fragmented. So by pulling this data into the common platform for a right-of-way agent or a capital planner, so we do integrations with we have a strategic partnership with our friends over at Autodesk, and on a sort of a similar thing on the design side, we expose design models and that kind of thing to capital planners for the same reason, just to try and have one single place where folks are working from. So that just speeds everything up, and then you're not having an argument about, did you have the latest version? Is this the later version? You're getting up from your desk, running over to somebody to check all those details. It just streamlines the whole process. Yeah.
And if I can just add one more thing to Richard, you just hit the nail on the head there too. I mean, the system really is designed for the non-heavy users of the technical pieces. So we have GIS specialists and technologists and analysts and data folks that really do all the heavy lifting with the data and do all the approvals of what gets entered in the system or what they're working on in the system. So they always have that most current version and accurate version available to them in the system, which is not, they're not GIS techies, for example. So having it ready for them, and similar to the example you used about AutoCAD. So.
All right, the next question, it came from anonymous attendee, but I think it's good. How many staff hours did it take to create templates before the system, and how long does it take to create templates now that you have the system?
That is a great question. I am not the person who creates the templates, but based on the feedback from those who do actually create templates for our agreements, because they are mostly our agreements templates and our memos and things like that, it has cut the time in half, because the data is already pre-populated in forms. So they're not chasing around who the owner is, what the legal description of the parcel that they need to that they need to identify in the document, or looking for pin pages or plans and things like that. So everything is sort of right there for them in one place. So it has actually cut their time in half, and their back and forward time with following up with the appraiser and negotiators and saying, you know, did I get this information right or not? It's far more straightforward. It's a one shot, here we're done, and there's a lot less back and forth as well. So it actually has greatly improved our efficiencies and our workflow.
Now, another question coming from Michelle: how well do you work with outside programs, real estate records, recording portals, email in and out capabilities? So how well do you work with outside programs?
That's a great question. The system is set up so that it can integrate pretty much with any program. We ourselves in the region only have it interacting right now with our document management system. In the future, we hope to have it interact with some of our other systems, which in a nutshell is quite straightforward. It's just we're not there yet. As far as email, we never meant it to be integrated with email, so we never went down that path, but I'm certain that based on the architecture and the infrastructure of the way Masterworks is developed, that there would be opportunities to pretty much integrate any third-party system into the system. We had no problem doing it with our document management system. It was quite straightforward. And any sort of thing where we've asked or we've talked or sort of plan moving forward, Aurigo's open to investigate and look at opportunities and options of how to do it best.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I could joke that integration is our middle name at Aurigo. Again, it just comes back to what I said before, that owners all have their unique setup, and you've got to be able to accommodate that. You can't jam folks into one size fit all solution. So we integrate all the time with finance systems and other external tools that folks want to keep using. So yeah, again, just, you know, talk to us and we'll eventually, you know, iron out those details.
Okay. Next question. This was from an anonymous person. Were there any pushbacks, especially between local community plans and regional initiatives?
No, I would say not at all. In fact, our regional groups, or sorry, our municipal groups have really been interested in what we're doing at the regional level, and you know, we've opened up the opportunity that potentially this is something that they might want to use for themselves, but there was never any pushback, and in fact, full support for it. And if anything, more curious about how they could do it as well.
All right, and then this question came from Hadir. Doesn't know if this was asked, but he wants to know, what kind of integration do you have with the corporate document system, and is it directly linked or just referenced to the Masterworks system?
Yeah, so it's a direct link. So when a user physically clicks on the link once we add it into Masterworks, once the link is in Masterworks, when they click on it, it'll open up the actual document, not a reference to the document, which is great. So you can version up from there. You can, you do everything that you would do in the actual document management system itself. And we just recently built in a way to grab everything that's in that grid and email it directly from the system to whomever you'd like to send it to. So it's a full integration with that document management system. I'm sure that there are more things that we can do, and as people ask for them, we look at them. But because we've integrated it fully, we have that opportunity to open and expand different pieces.
Thank you. And going through, so follow up on that question, if there are external users who can access the system.
So we only have York Region corporate users. Well, as I mentioned earlier in our organizational chart, we do have subsidiaries, and one of them is the York Rapid Transit, who was involved in the Viva Next project, and they are in an external location and they have a license and are able to access it. The nice thing about Masterworks, it being cloud-based, really makes it accessible anywhere. We have worked with the mobile options as well. So there is that flexibility. People can use it everywhere. We just never needed to roll it out beyond the corporation. But there is would definitely not be an issue to do so. The way we have it set up currently, though, is definitely within the region plus our subsidiaries.
And I would say across our whole customer base, probably I would say about 2/3 of folks are using it both internally and externally. So not everybody. A lot of folks also start out with just internal, and then they kind of, once they've got that phase one up and running, you know, every implementation we do, we try to phase it in a way that sort of makes sense for the client to get them up and running as quickly as possible. And so folks will sometimes start with a phase one, which is internal, and then move to bring, you know, consultants, contractors, whoever on board. One way when it comes to sort of appraisal and right-of-way management that I know folks are using it for is just for that survey and appraisal phrase right up front, where you're actually trying to assess the value of the property and get an idea of that. That can be done remotely via, you know, a tablet rather than carrying a clipboard around. And a lot of folks seem to outsource that part of it, you know, to a specialty sub that does appraisals. So we do have those folks that are sometimes on the system, and then that's where the permissioning comes into play, because you know, you might have they would see a different set of data to what internal employees would see.
All right, and then we have another question from Michael. Does the system handle record dispositions? Example, can it be configured into a dispose of records once they've been held for a specific period of time?
Actually, I'm not sure. I'd have to pass that to Richard, because we do that through our document management system, which is also why we wanted our document management system connected to Masterworks, because corporately we have a very extensive policy based on how that record is stored, what its retention time is. So that was one of the key things for us, of having that integration, so that we were actually using the corporate standard. So I'll pass it over to you, Richard. I'm not certain.
Yeah, we have customers, you know, who they're required to keep, you know, like say the water distribution network, or anything to do with underground stuff, really, for that. I think for electric, it's like 30 years, and water, it's like 50 years. So the whole data retention thing is definitely part of you know, what you want to go through when you implement the software. If the question is, we can definitely archive it. So, you know, it hits a certain date and it can get archived into an archive thing. I don't know if we've been asked to completely get rid of it. I don't know if that was the question, just to delete it, which usually when you're in a SaaS-based system, you know, storage is virtually free. So you don't need to worry about, you know, running out of storage space. So typically it's just archived and not completely deleted, but we could probably do that too, if we had to.
Next question. What are the main challenges you face during the process of procurement and defining the scope of work?
That is a great question, because we had a lot of things that we really wanted long-term that we sort of had to move off from the in-scope world and put it into the out-of-scope piece. Because really it comes down to what we needed right now, and how long that would take us to get what we needed in place so that we could get working within that system. I mean, everybody's organizations have different procurement processes. You know, ours is a lengthy process. You know, it does involve us doing industry scans. It involves us reaching out to potential vendors. But at the end of the day, the process, well, we actually still, even when we went out to RFQ, did not know about Aurigo. And we kind of stumbled upon them because another group within our region uses them for construction component. And so that's how we actually learned about Aurigo. So for us, we probably would still be struggling, because there's not a lot of systems out there that do the whole gamut of things that we had in our project vision. And so what I would have to say is that initially we struggled on the planning phase of what really was in scope and what was out of scope, and getting everybody on board to really tailor it down, because you can have the world, but you can't always afford the world. And you really have to be realistic about what your end goal is. So we had quite a extensive amount of time spent on that, with a lot of individuals from that cross-functional team, and really narrowed down what was in scope. Then we sort of went out to try to find it, and we're concerned that we might actually have had to have multiple systems integrated with one another to be able to get our end solution. And then we came across Aurigo, and Aurigo really stood out because they were able to integrate all of those pieces together, and they were one vendor. So for us, the process really was hard in that out of scope piece, and then initially finding someone, and then when we found Aurigo, it was pretty straightforward from that point forward.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, definitely, again, talk to us. There's, we only, 95% of our customers are public entities in either the US or in Canada. So we're very familiar with how those entities procure software. And we have different ways, like we're listed on the GSA in the US. There's, cooperative, purchasing vehicles that we could potentially use. So again, it just depends on your exact circumstance, and we can chat about that with you.
Okay. Looks like we have about 8 more minutes. Do we have time to answer 2 more questions?
Yeah, it's probably good. Yeah.
Okay. So Michelle said, did you set up each partial on your BRT from the TE to the payment? And did you condemn any partial, and how well does it work? That's a very...
Sorry, can you read that again? Sorry,
Yeah,
we set up?
Did you set up each partial on your BRT from the TE to the payment? And did you condemn any partial, and how well does it work?
Yeah, so we actually set up absolutely everything. So to answer the first question, yes, we set up everything. And it is very effective. It works very well. And I would have to say that I don't really know how to answer the condemn part, because we didn't really condemn any. Yeah, so the system, the way we built the system is very effective. We basically put absolutely everything in. Maybe I'm just not understanding the condemn. What are we referring to by condemn? Can we ask that question back?
Yeah, Michelle, do you mind kind of asking?
Because I'm wondering if it's a terminology.
Yeah,
It's not something I've heard in.
let's see.
But in any case, we set it up so that regardless of what our takings were from, sort of pavement onward, we're set up in the system, and anything that, basically any parcels that we touched were in the system, even if they were no land taken.
Okay, so she said that condemn is a US word for expropriation.
Oh, okay, that's what I was wondering. I'm thinking, yeah, because here we think of condemn as like, okay, that's no longer an authorized. So yes, okay, fair. So every expropriation, yes, everything went into the system, every requirement as part of the expropriation. So our permanent easements, our temporary easements, our fee simples, everything went in, and everything is tracked right from the point of the expropriation plan onward. And in addition to that, we actually also track expropriation plan dates. And we look at section 22 notices so that we can also look at if business loss is still viable, and sort of all the pieces around the expropriation component. And we also have accrual tracking that tracks sort of the 6% on liabilities that haven't been paid out or haven't been stopped with section 25s being accepted. So we sort of go through that whole process all the way through to the minutes of full and final. If we and some of our corridors, we actually went back and expropriated 3 times. Every interest is entered into the system so that we can sort of go back and track sort of that everything is closed out before a property is actually done.
Okay. All right, and then I guess the last question that we'll ask, I know there's a lot of other questions, but as we said before, if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you via email. The last question came from Elise. What is one thing you wish you would have done differently when doing the process?
That's a great question. And if I had a do-over, my one thing would actually be the way we set up agreements. So the reason I say that is in our system, we have set it up so that you have a project, you have a property. Within that property, you have your agreements. Now, in some cases, properties along an expropriated corridor, two properties very far from one another can be the same owner. And when you get into that full and final situation where you're full and final minutes, and you need to settle both of those properties with that one full and final settlement, the system, in the way we set it up, does not allow you to do that in the best possible way. You actually have to make a dummy agreement to close out the record on one of the subject properties. And if we had designed it slightly differently, you could have the agreements closing out 20 of the subject properties if you want. And of course, where there's two subject properties side by side that have the same owner, they would technically be, thought of as the one subject property. But when you're expropriating, you might not think that they're going to settle the one, 10 kilometers away from the other one on the corridor. So that for us was a really big thing. So think about that if you're planning on going down this route. Think about how your settlement agreements might need to close out your properties, because we do end up with extra agreements that we use sort of as, I term them dummy agreements, to be able to close out the properties effectively.
All right, well, thanks so much. And we want to thank everybody in the audience for all the questions. This pretty much concludes our presentation. As we said before, the presentations and the slides will be provided to you after the webinar. So we will send them via email. And thank you very much. We wish everyone a great rest of the day and enjoy your Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christie-Lee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye, everyone.